There comes a moment in life when you realize something uncomfortable about yourself. You notice how easily a single comment can shake you, how one small rejection can linger in your chest for hours, how one cold tone from someone you care about can sit in your mind like a weight. Most people walk around not knowing that they are far easier to hurt than they think. And while no one wants to admit it, this pain shapes their relationships, their self-image, and even their future. But there is something else that most people also notice, although they rarely talk about. Some individuals seem almost impossible to shake. They hear the same insults, the same criticisms, the same emotional hits that would crush someone else, and yet they walk away intact. They do not crumble. They do not spiral. They do not hand their power away. They are not cold. They are not numb. They are emotionally untouchable. This video is about the psychological shift that allows someone to reach that state. A shift that does not make you harder, but makes you clearer. A shift that does not shut down emotion, but neutralizes emotional control. A shift that takes you from constantly being affected by others to becoming the person who decides how deeply something gets in. It is a shift anyone can learn, but most people never do. Not because it is complicated, but because it requires them to face something they avoid. The reason you get hurt is not because of what they said. It is because of what you believed it meant. Think about the last time someone hurt you with their words. Maybe it was a criticism. Maybe a sarcastic comment. Maybe they dismissed you. Maybe they ignored you. Most likely, their words hit a part of you that was already sensitive. This is why the first truth of emotional strength is this: you are not hurt by the words themselves. You are hurt by the meaning your mind attaches to those words. Someone can say the exact same sentence to two different people, and one of them will forget it within minutes, while the other will replay it for weeks. The difference is not in the insult. The difference is in the internal framework, interpreting it. This brings us to the core idea of this entire video. Emotionally untouchable people have separated their sense of self-worth from external input. They do not depend on others to tell them who they are. They do not rely on approval to feel valuable. They do not crumble from criticism because their identity is not up for public negotiation. Their self-worth is sourced internally, not externally, and that is the shift that changes everything. To understand why this matters, imagine that your sense of self sits inside your chest like a delicate object. Now imagine that you hand this object to someone else, maybe to a partner, maybe to a friend, maybe to a stranger online. When you give someone else the power to define your worth, you also give them the power to hurt you. You let them hold the fragile part of you. You let them decide your emotional reality. Emotionally untouchable people never hand this over. The reason insults bounce off them is not because they think they are perfect. It is because they know themselves well enough that someone else's opinion cannot rewrite their identity. The reason criticism does not crush them is because they understand that feedback only matters when it aligns with their own truth. And the reason manipulative people cannot control them is because they do not fall for emotional hooks that rely on insecurity. Here's the truth you have probably felt, but never articulated. You can only be deeply hurt by words that match a fear you already carry. If someone calls you something you absolutely know you are not, you shrugged. It does not land. But if someone speaks to an insecurity you have not resolved, it stings. Not because they were powerful, but because the wound already existed. Emotionally untouchable people have done the work to know what is real and what is not. They refuse to let comments attach to the parts of themselves that are still growing. This mindset shift starts with a simple practice, but it is transformative. They pause before interpreting anything. Most people react instantly, and that reaction is not from truth. It is from old wounds. When emotionally untouchable people hear something painful, they do not absorb it immediately. They hold it at a distance. They mentally step back for a second. That pause is the difference between reacting from emotion or responding from wisdom. The pause gives them ownership over interpretation, instead of letting automatic insecurity fill in the meaning. After the pause comes the filter. This is where they ask one of the most powerful questions a person can learn. Is this really about me, or is this about them? Most of the time, emotional attacks reflect the internal struggles of the person delivering them. Insecure people project insecurity. Angry people project blame. Manipulative people project control. The emotionally untouchable do not personalize what is not personal. They filter comments through self-awareness instead of self-doubt. Then comes the reframe. This is where they reinterpret the situation through clarity rather than fear. They remind themselves that someone's reaction is shaped by their own history, their own wounds, their own frustrations. They realize that emotional attacks usually reveal more about the attacker than the target, and in that moment, the power dynamic flips. What once would have felt like a knife now feels like information. They are learning something about the other person, not about themselves. The final step is centering. Emotionally untouchable people bring their mind back to their own definition of who they are. This is the shift that closes the loop. Your identity is not something people get to edit. Your worth is not something people get to adjust. When you evaluate yourself based on your own standards, you cut the strings that allow others to pull your emotions up and down. This is the psychological shift in motion. And when it becomes a habit, hurt cannot travel as deeply. Now, let's go deeper into why so many people are hurt easily in the first place. There are 3 root causes, and each one has nothing to do with the people around you. They come from inside you, but once you see them, they can be changed. The first root cause is identity insecurity. When you have not formed a clear picture of who you are, you automatically absorb the opinions of others. You look outward to figure out who you are supposed to be. This is why criticism feels like a threat. It is not hurting your feelings. It is shaking your identity. Emotionally untouchable people develop a stable sense of self that cannot be shifted by casual opinions. The second root cause is emotional hypervigilance. If your past includes pain, betrayal, abandonment, or humiliation, your brain becomes trained to detect emotional threat quickly. You assume comments are meant to hurt you, even when they are not. You interpret neutral moments as danger. Emotional hypervigilance makes you sensitive to emotional hits because you expect them, but emotionally untouchable people break this cycle by grounding themselves in the present rather than reliving the past. They stop scanning for emotional danger and start observing reality. The third root cause is outcome attachment. This happens when you depend on certain reactions from others in order to feel stable. You expect people to behave in a certain way. You expect them to validate you. You expect them to respond kindly. When they do not, it feels like betrayal. But this is because you attached your emotional peace to their behavior. Emotionally untouchable people do not tie their well-being to other people's consistency. Their peace is internal, not conditional. So how do you apply this shift in real life? Start with a pause. When something hits you emotionally, do not react. Let the moment breathe, then bring in the filter. Ask yourself if this is genuinely about you or if it is expressing something the other person is struggling with. After that, reframe it. Interpret the comment from a position of strength rather than fear. Finally, center yourself in your own identity. Remember who you are, independent of their opinion. This is not about becoming cold. It is not about numbing emotion. It is about creating internal authority. When you stop giving emotional power to every passing opinion, you become grounded. You become stable. You become someone who cannot be emotionally hijacked. Emotionally untouchable people feel emotions the same way everyone else does. They feel pain. They feel disappointment. They feel frustration. But they do not fuse these emotions to their identity. They do not say this hurt me, so it must define me. They say this hurt me, so I need to understand what it touched. Pain becomes information, not identity. And here is the deeper truth. When you fear emotional pain, people can weaponize it. They can use guilt against you. They can use silence against you. They can use rejection against you. They can use your insecurities against you. But when you stop fearing pain, when you see it as something that rises and falls like a passing wave, people lose the ability to control you emotionally. That is why this shift is so powerful. The moment you stop fearing emotional impact is the moment you become unstoppable. Imagine how different your life becomes when this shift becomes natural. Someone criticizes you, and instead of spiraling, you analyze it calmly. Someone tries to manipulate you, and instead of reacting, you stay centered. Someone disrespects you, and instead of internalizing it, you detach from it. Your relationships become healthier. Your decisions become clearer. Your sense of self becomes stronger. You stop chasing validation. You stop over-explaining. You stop trying to please everyone. And ironically, you become more respected because people can feel your emotional independence. Others can no longer hurt you in the same way because you are no longer giving them access to the fragile parts of you. You stop handing out emotional authority like it is free. You stop letting people define your reality. You stop letting insecurity be the lens through which you interpret everything. The psychological shift that stops people from hurting you is the shift back to yourself. It is the shift where you reclaim the power you used to outsource. It is the shift where your worth becomes self-generated. When this happens, emotional untouchability is not a wall, it is clarity. It is not armor. It is awareness. It is not numbness. It is strength. And if you practice this mindset, moment by moment, interpretation by interpretation, day by day, you will watch the world transform. Not because the world changed, but because your mind stopped giving it the power to break you. If you want more videos that help you understand the psychology behind who we are, subscribe for more.